We did live in the area which became a ghetto, but as it happened, I was staying with my father's family just after Warsaw was occupied, which was outside the ghetto. So when the Germans ordered anybody who's Jewish, first of all, to give away all their things, and then move into the ghetto. It was a Jewish district, and I think all our friends, when I think about it, very few exceptions were Jews. In my family, they tried so hard to lead some kind of imitation of normal life, even through the worst times, and they were quite prepared. I remember sackfuls of beans and flour being brought to the very early on as food to be there. So in some ways we were quite privileged, probably. The people were, even I saw people, dead people in the streets, swollen, and some of the children I went to school with terribly swollen from hunger, but we in some ways were quite protected. I remember being very cold, but I don't remember being very hungry. And I even remember going to a puppet show in the ghetto. So things went on while so much else, there were hangings in the streets and shootings, and we were not allowed to leave the courtyard where we played with other children. We knew, I and my sister, who were then only 8 or 9, knew that it was a death camp, and that if we were caught, we should not bother to take anything with us. And yes, we hid first of all in a secret place. It was a very tiny place where I remember we couldn't even light a match because there was so little air. While we were there at night, one of my mother's sort of comrades knocked on the door and told us we had to leave and follow him to a bunker. And I remember he carried a revolver, and I found that very exciting. And so we hid in this big kind of hiding place where there were lots of people. So we survived till very late hiding, and we still had some food. My father, he was not in Poland, he was in Russia at that time. But one of the people from whom I didn't know came. We were told to get dressed, to wear double clothes, doubles of sweaters and things. And we were told to go, and we were told new names. He had some false baptism certificates for us, and told never to tell anybody who we were. If it was discovered, they were risking being shot, not just they, but their whole families. So it was a terrible secret. And we understood it immediately, but I can't even particularly remember saying goodbye to anybody because it was all done so quickly and as a surprise. And there was a ladder, and we climbed up the ladder. I can't remember how we got to on the other side, if there was a ladder or if we jumped with Michał and ran after him onto a tram. And what I remember, how people on the tram began to look at us very suspiciously and somehow grumble, and Michał told us to quickly jump off the tram and go with him. And that was the first time I sort of realized how it was, we didn't just have to be frightened of the Germans, but of the local people. They were the people who could recognize us, could tell. The Germans couldn't. We were sometimes, when we went out, recognized usually by children who would scream at us that we were Jewesses. And quite often some passers-by would shush them away, the people walking by. It would protect us, yes. The family we stayed with were paid. There was money coming from abroad, there was a Polish government in exile in London, and somehow, I don't know how, money came from abroad. During the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, the priest was saying, you see what happens to the infidels, the ghetto was burning, it was so visible everywhere, bits of burning paper flying. and everybody could see what was happening, and he was preaching that that's just kind of what happens to people who are infidels. On the whole, it was sort of shameful to be hiding Jews. And we were living just outside where we could see the ghetto burning. They were frightened to have two girls, so they decided they would just keep my sister. But other people became sort of responsible for me in some ways. It was probably, that's one of her jobs. She came and she found, I don't know how, she found some other family. A very disorganized, very, especially the man who's young and a drunkard. But anyway, I was taken to them, also in Warsaw. And yes, they did it for money, and he was drunk and used to beat his wife. But I have to say, he never hit me, he never did me any harm. And some people were very kind to me. I was going out and playing with the children in the street. And especially there was a family that used to invite me to have tea, and I'm sure they guessed I was Jewish. Well, I knew they did, because when the Warsaw Uprising in 1944 happened, and when that was lost, and the Germans evacuated everybody from this area of Warsaw, and I remember we were taken at first to a big church where the Germans were taking, especially young men, for some work in Germany. Well, the same family, which, I don't know, taught me something, who were so kind to me. She got up and I somehow must have sat in her place. And I suppose everybody was terribly frightened and nervous. But when she saw me in her chair, I can't remember, I didn't realize I was sitting in her chair. She began to shout, "Oh, that Jewess." And there were other occasions where people did both things, were very nice to me, and on the other hand, suddenly would threaten me with death, really. As time goes on, I remember more kindnesses. At first, I remembered all these terrible things.